Oh, like the angry man said, that Soul and Black sent up the bat signal for all the black YouTubers to actually come out and make a comment. And he was talking about Yanya Van Zant's series on OWN network, talking about the myth of the angry black woman. And the angry black woman was basically a carryover from the civil rights era, which is used to be the angry Negro. And the angry black woman is meme has been around from the for I would say that when I first heard about it was in the 80s, the mid 80s. So this has been around for at least 30 years about the angry black woman. And in the 80s, there was a lot published about it. There was the seminal book by Shahrazad Ali, which was Black Man's Guide to the Black Woman. That was the seminal book about the angry black woman. But the angry black woman started to appear based in the mid 70s with for colored girls. That was the first. That was the first book or the first play about the angry black woman and the type of men that she was getting, and that's basically off of the. I can't remember the name of the book. Scratch that. We won't even go into that. We won't even go into the history of it. But it's been around. The meme has been around for a while. The angry black woman is is basically a cover for the dysfunctional black woman. A lot of that dysfunction because of the state that we were in, which was segregation, where we had to be fairly close knit in the community or the society, because it was so close knit, had to police itself. So a lot of the dysfunction got handled because our community was kind of closed off and we had to basically police ourselves. So the men had to basically police the men and the women had to police the women. So even though there was severe dysfunction in the black family, it got masked over because we had greater obstacles against. It's like during wartime, a lot of your societal dysfunction gets glossed over because you have a greater enemy. You have to worry about national survival, so you don't have time to bicker about all the other dysfunction that's going on in society. Same thing with the black community. When overt racism and Jim Crow was attacking our family, we didn't have time to worry about familiar dysfunction. We had to worry about us surviving and our children surviving, us making a living, us having to walk the line in a racist society. Once a lot of that was removed, and a lot of it was removed, we don't like to think about it. Like, racism is still alive and well, but it's more of a benign racism that we face nowadays instead of the overt racism that we faced, I would say even 50 years ago. That being said, once the overt racism got replaced with benign neglect or benign racism, then a lot of the dysfunction in our culture, the dysfunction in our family started to surface because now we had the opportunity and the freedom to go outside of it. So that's why it started. A lot of stuff that didn't appear publicly in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s started to appear in the 70s. Because now black women had access to the same things that white women had access to. She didn't have to worry about her children starving in the street. So a lot of the dysfunction that never got cleaned up, that never got addressed amongst the black male and female, now that they could be separated from each other without severe consequences, these memes or these themes got brought up. And everything I've heard with Jana Van Zant is something that's been going on a while. And even I was just looking at one of her older shows when she talked about the man that had multiple children. by multiple women. The guy that had 34 children. There was younger women that were in their 20s, and there are women in their 60s that actually go through the same thing. So in other words, this is a multi-generational thing that's been going on for a long, 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 long time. Now the difference is now we have more cameras, we have more freedom, and we have more tools to detect the dysfunction than we did a while back. So let's get to the meat of this. I don't want this to be too long. There were several women that talked about hatred of their mothers. That was a big running thing. The father or the men were always secondary. It was secondary. Anger with the men, anger with black men is a secondary thing. It's a secondary thing, and it's misplaced anger upon the fathers is because of what Stardust called male mother need. It's very difficult to hate your mother. For any child, that's even children that have been abandoned, have been abused, have been given away. It's very difficult to hate your mother. You see it all the time. Blame will be placed upon the man. Say even a child that's been molested. Say a woman, especially a woman that's been molested. Blame will be placed upon the person that did the act, almost 100%, and never upon the mother whose boyfriend it was, or a mother who brought that man into the household. That's just an example. That's just one example. It's because children have because of the biology, because of the shared cells. You have your mother's cells inside of you. You have a magnetic resonance and a body connection to your mother. It's very difficult for any child to blame the mother. So when women come from a dysfunctional family and a dysfunctional mother, guess where the blame is put upon? It's always put upon what? The absent father. I was just looking at, and I might put that up because it would almost have to be a series because the themes keep coming up so often. I was just looking at a paternity court series, paternity court episode where this black woman, after I think she was in her 30s, she might have been a little older than that. She was in her 30s, her mid 30s. She was bringing who she thought was her father to paternity court to see if he really was her father, even though he had told her he wasn't. He had evidence that he wasn't. She blamed him for the ordeal that she went through. Her mother put them in foster care. The mother put them in homes. The mother brought them back when she thought she could get money and a house for them. And when she couldn't, she sent them back into foster care. So these children were in and out of foster care. But she could not bring herself to put the blame on her mother. She solely placed that anger, solely placed that hurt upon a man who she thought was her father. Even at the very end of the episode, where she finds out that the man is not her father, and that everything that he had been telling her was the truth, it crushed her, not because the man wasn't her father or that she couldn't find her father. It crushed her because she could not bring herself to put the blame on her mother. So what you see, a lot of what you see of projection upon black men is misplaced anger. Very seldom do you see an angry woman or a dysfunctional woman come from a functional mother. Very seldom. That's how come every time you see a woman that has male problems or has man problems, always talks about them not having a father. I don't even know if I'm gonna get into the esoteric thing about that because I did touch on that in a couple of videos. I might do that later on in this talk, or I might do that later in another separate video. But the point I want to get to is that the basis of the angry black woman is because of the dysfunctional family structure. And the thing is, everybody asks, okay, why is there a dysfunctional family structure, especially amongst black people, where you don't see it in white people? And this is something that I kind of knew and kind of touched upon, but Alexander Migto's video, because he's European, because he's German, he's a Northern European German Protestant. And the nuclear family, or what we call, well, they call it the simple household type back then, as far as anthropologists call it a simple household type, which is known as the precursor for the nuclear family, is in his culture. That's where it started. That's where it's developed, and that's where it's spread. And it's a very unique feature of Europe, and only for that part of Europe. The rest of Europe and the rest of the world does not exist with a nuclear family. So when capitalism, and especially industrial capitalism, came upon the scene, because of the nuclear family was already there, it was, and the culture developed this industrial revolution as we, in industrial capitalism we know now. The family structure that they had was especially suited for this particular civilization, this industrial civil capitalist civilization that we live in. Because guess where the industrial capitalism came out of? It came out of that culture. So it naturally would be suited to what? Their family structure. So they brought industrial capitalism and that way of life along with them. So naturally, their culture has fixed all the bugs of the nuclear family, or as many, or they've perfected the nuclear family as far as they could. So you see the 1940s to the 1950s, and the 1960s as the heyday of the nuclear family, because that was the peak. That was the golden age of the nuclear family. After 300 years of basically cultural work perfecting the nuclear family amongst white people. The nuclear family is not a cultural tradition for any place else in the world. So when you have black people that have been brought in and brought over, and we're not even going to get into that conversation of whether black people, the indigenous black people or whatnot. We're not even get into that conversation. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you're African slave that has been brought over from Africa, or you're in so-called indigenous African person or indigenous black person. It doesn't matter. Your culture is the same as basically 95% of the world, which is an extended kinship family. And in the South, even in the slave quarters, or even in the South, where the majority of black people lived or presided, and even in the North, black people practiced their cultural family ties, which was an extended kin. So even though we have irrelated people, we adopted people into our family circle. They become aunts, they become uncles, they become cousins and whatnot, whether they're blood relations or not, because that is the way our family structure worked. So after the 1940s, when they started assimilating us into what? The nuclear family, and started turning us into nuclear families, what do you think you're going to see? You're going to see dysfunction. First of all, because the motto of the nuclear family is ill-suited to the culture of black people. Second of all, as Alexander Migtow says, the nuclear family is artificial. It is a product. It is not. Capitalism and industrial capitalism is supposed to be a product of the culture, as a cultural item, as a cultural tool. The reverse has happened for the for the nuclear family. It is a product of the environment that people live in, which is an artificial environment. Industrial capitalism it is a artificial environment, and it has forced upon us an artificial family structure. And because it is artificial, it has to be maintained artificially by the state. There's a clip that I have that says for a nuclear family to exist, there has to be a strong central government or a strong government structure, because a nuclear family cannot exist outside of that. It's like having a polar bear in San Diego. If you take that polar bear off the ice caps and put it in 90-degree weather in San Diego, and you have no way to cool that polar bear, the polar bear will die. It cannot exist outside the artificial environment that you created for it. Same thing with a nuclear family. It's breaking down amongst the people that created it, which is European Caucasians, because as the central government changes and decays into something else, was the nuclear family is going along with it. So if it's happening amongst white people, as Alexander McTow was saying, amongst white people, what do you think is going to happen to black people? It's going to decay and decay even faster. In fact, there was an article, I don't know if probably have to find it, where they're talking about not the angry black woman, but the angry black girl, where little girls are starting to become angry at the age of 8 years old. You mix an ill-fitted family structure on the black people. You put the artificial structure that you fitted onto them as a model, as far as the state is concerned, is decaying and coming apart at the seams. And then you put on top of that a feminist structure that wants to flip the gender roles. So you're putting females, women, and girls into roles that they're biologically not suited for. At the top, going back down, you're putting black girls into roles and models that they're biologically not suited for. You're putting on an ill-fitting family structure onto them that they're raised in, that's decaying, and then their cultural norm or their cultural history does not suit the form that you're trying to put on them. So all the rest of this stuff, if you listen to their stories, all start from that seed and sprout its way up. It all starts from that seed, going all the way back. When you try to take a woman, a black woman who has been abused through racism, Jim Crow, and the whole 9 yards, try to shoehorn them into a model that's ill-fitting, into a suit that's ill-fitting, that's too tight, and it starts busting at the seams. What do you expect? So now instead of dysfunctional women coming out of adolescence, now they're even starting earlier. What are we going to do next? Start just like we do with our boys. We're going to start pumping them with Ritalin, put them on ADHD drugs, start giving them anxiety medication at age 5 or 6 years old. What are you going to do? The model does not work. The absolute model does not work. So all the stories about whether black men like white women or vice versa, all this stuff stems from the exact same thread. Nobody looks at culture. Everybody wants to look at each individual symptom instead of the cause. Probably because you can't fix the cause. You might not be able to fix the cause. I think that's the biggest thing that's going on with people. How come they don't want to look at it? Because you might not be able to fix the cause because you can't fix the environment. You can't fix the environment. You can't fix the culture. And that's a rock that's too big to move, especially for black people. So men escaping, black men escaping to other races, or women that come from outside of the American culture because the black women are so severely damaged. And that's the real issue that black women don't want to admit to. That black, excuse my French, black men are fucked up, but they're nowhere near as damaged as the black women are. How do I know that? Because guess who they're calling on to come fix them? As badly beaten up and damaged as black men are, and God knows black men are damaged and beaten up. Black men are still getting shot in the streets for sitting in a freaking car reading a book, or getting shot in the middle of the highway because their car broke down, and having to see that every day on Facebook or YouTube or the news, and just wondering when some crazy ass nervous cop is going to punch your lotto ticket. As damaged as we are in this crazy ass environment, guess who is begging for us to come fix them, which is black women. So even though they don't want to admit it, they're far more damaged than black men are, because they depend on the environment a lot more than we do. Men all over the world are somewhat, by necessity, slightly independent of their environment, because they have to be. Because as hunters, your terrain will change, your environment will change, and if you can't adapt to it, or you can't overcome it, you will die. So men are somewhat independent to the culture and the cultural environment that they live in. Women are gatherers. They're not hunters. They're gatherers. They're completely dependent on the environment around them. If there's nothing to gather, they will starve. If the environment doesn't nourish them, they will be damaged and they'll be sickly. Western civilization, because of its decay, or the Industrial Revolution, because of the change and decay that it's going through, is toxic for all women, and especially black women. That's why you see this dysfunction. As I say to MGTOWs, this really isn't rocket science. If you look at all the aspects and all the components, it's really common sense. Do I say blame these women for who they are and how they act? For the most part, no. But at some point, you have to have some kind of personal responsibility as an adult. And when you have an environment of where the white feminists who don't want to take responsibility for their own shortcomings, or projecting that on black females. So black females don't want to be responsible for their shortcomings, which further disables them and makes them more dysfunctional. So am I saying that black men arbitrarily should feel sorry for them and be with them just because? I would say no. This is not about pointing blame. This is not about feeling sorry for you or having pity for anybody. This is about understanding the problem. But this is a first response. This is off the cuff because I've been lazy and haven't gotten to a more, how Crystal Kerrison says, nuanced or more complete description or complete presentation, because this is more of a discussion or a rant than it is a presentation. Like I said, if nothing else, go back and revisit the Alexander Micto post I put up, because he basically nailed it as far as the nuclear family, and it's coming from somebody that's inside the culture that knows his own history, because the nuclear family is not black history. It is his history. It is white man's history. It's European history. And if you look at that and see what the nuclear family actually is for what it is, that is a ideal that we've been chasing that's false. We've been brainwashed to look at that as the ideal family structure, and it's false. So all our angst and all our frustration comes from us, black men and black women, trying to live up to an ideal that is historically false. But I'm going to get to that in another video. But this is getting kind of long, so I'm going to wrap this up. This is my response to Soul and Black's call about the myth of the angry black woman. Like always, comment, share, make another video. Tell me what you think. Keep the conversation going. This is BGS.